What's up, Fight Fam? We got yet another highly desired fantasy matchup between two fan-friendly undefeated rising stars, Jaron Ennis and Vergil Ortiz. Fingers crossed that this fight actually happens next year, as this ought to be a good one. Now let's get into it. Boots uses probes in order to occupy space in order to measure and keep distance. Pins to keep his opponent's guard stationary to close distance or change angles. Those stab jabs to break posture and reset his opponent's advance. Uses feints to momentarily freeze or make his opponents disengage. And set up his rear hand or combinations. These could do wonders in attacking Ortiz's high guard, which is what he dominantly uses. When fighting in the open stance, he also fences or jab jousts to establish control of his opponent's lead hand, as well as creating a physical barrier to occupy the empty space between him and his opponent. Ortiz, however, mostly engages by matching or parrying his opponent's probes. So Boots can draw these out and stick the jab in the cleared lane. Outside of that, Vergil's hands stay at home, potentially volunteering control of distance and the jab lane to Ennis. He does, however, use level changes and pre-slips as preemptive head movement as well as feints for reads. Typically, he looks to lull his opponents to sleep or have no reaction from his feints while slowly closing distance with subtle half steps to create offense. If while controlling distance Ennis backs out near the ropes, his probes become significantly less effective with less space to move and risk having the same issues as a single mid-range jab. Which Ortiz is shown to be able to time and counter. With that being said, using pivots and lateral movement to turn Ortiz could prevent Boots from losing too much ground while making Ortiz's offense fall short.
Fight fam, boxing is called the sweet science for a reason. Every slip, every counter, every trap, it's all hidden in the details. At Boxing Gems, we break down those details frame by frame so fans can see the art behind the fight. If you enjoy our YouTube film studies and want to go deeper down the rabbit hole, Patreon is the place. It helps us keep producing high quality breakdowns without worrying about algorithms, and it gives you exclusive access to the content that can't make it on the YouTube. Get extended live stream breakdowns with more detail and analysis. Ask your own questions in the 24/7 chats, decide what fights or fighters we cover, and get personalized private analysis. Gain access to our thriving betting community as well as Boxing Gems weekly picks and much more. Your support means we can keep studying the sport we love and showing why boxing is the most beautiful science. Join the Boxing Gems community on Patreon and let's keep breaking down the fight game together. This is Ryan, professional boxing analyst and founder of Boxing Gems Film Study. Film don't lie.
Ortiz often uses a power jab where he pushes off the rear foot in order to generate power. Ortiz tends to push off the rear foot to the point where it has left him off balance and stuck on the lead foot while in range. What's more is that he tends to fall in with the jab, potentially colliding with his opponent's counter coming from the opposite direction, creating even more of a collision. Being an excellent counterpuncher, Boots has a myriad of jab counters that can punish Ortiz. Most fighters time the jab by recognizing their opponent's slow repetitive footwork rhythms. A fighter who usually has a back and forth rhythm will typically be vulnerable during that short window when their weight is on their front foot when they're taking a step. At the elite level, this concept is typically well understood and defended against, as fighters preemptively know to keep their hands up when in this position, as well as using other methods of jab defense. However, Boots seems to be vulnerable when on the front foot, as he tends to have his shields either partially up or completely down. Ortiz is very skilled at timing his opponent's rhythm when most of their weight is on their lead foot. Ortiz tends to reach when trying to land his rear hand. Typically, he lands in a squared position with the center line exposed. He also tends to drop his lead hand, leaving him susceptible to counter lead hooks from the open stance. Ennis is quite adept at abusing this with his own set of counters. On the other hand, Ortiz is shown to be defensive-minded after reaching by often shelling up as well, purposefully smothering into his opponent to then follow with a lead hand hook. Boots is no stranger to reaching either, but he tends to take it a step further. In addition to his rear leg almost always coming off the ground as he explodes forward, he may also get into a forward shift, causing a temporary change of stance while in range. While Boots is a switch hitter, changing stances without protecting the shift with subsequent punches from the same side he threw his rear hand runs the risk of him falling into the momentum of Ortiz's counters. When Ortiz comes forward, he often enters range by crosswalking or casually walking into range, breaking his base with each step out of a boxing stance until he finishes the step to return to stance. Things go from bad to worse as he occasionally steps in squared, adding more balance issues while making a bigger target for his opponent. Due to this, what is likely to give him the most issues is movement through the use of disengagement traps. A disengagement trap is when a fighter intentionally steps out of range to entice their opponent to step forward into range, in which if the opponent is stepping in, especially with poor footwork, the mover can attack while being set in stance, a trap that Boots uses very effectively. When Boots chooses to close distance, his footwork can put him at risk of angles as he struggles or fails to adjust to the new positioning. Lazily taking a half step allows his opponent to easily get to the new angle rather than properly pivoting to match it by taking the space his opponent previously held. In the close stance, if the op elects to step to the weak or strong side with a controller offense, that can prove to be problematic for Boots, especially during the time where he ends up being the top in open T disadvantageous positioning while at mid-range. In open T positioning, being the top of the T means you're squared while the stem means you're bladed. Being squared in this position exposes your center line to your bladed opponent, thus additional openings in your defense while making it difficult to rotate your hips, which reduces punching power. Ortiz is skilled at taking angles from either the strong or weak side to be in advantageous positioning. Ortiz has a good control game in the pocket. He utilizes frames, pins, and head control combined with physicality to momentarily stifle opponents' punching, control their guard, navigate them towards the ropes, deny or break clinches, and create space to establish offense. He also uses peels for the same purpose, so can add an extra layer of skill if or when his opponents start to anticipate the peel by keeping their hands up. In response, Vergil was shown to adjust by targeting their exposed body with hooks. He also uses front foot shuffles in order to attack his opponents from advantageous positioning before they adjust to the new angle. However, when Ortiz isn't using inside controls, he'll often get into an inactive high guard and let his hands go with combinations at a high frequency while in the 50-50, essentially making his offense his defense, as well as putting himself at risk of getting caught in between exchanges. Although Boots can have success using the inside controls mentioned for Ortiz, Boots is typically more of a liability when in the pocket. For starters, he tends to utilize soft controls that can be pushed off or broken through if his opponents use physicality. This issue is just as evident when he tries to initiate clinches. Last but not least, he can ultimately decide to abandon controls and get into 50-50 exchanges where he may have the advantage due to his athleticism, but he's far likelier to be hit. especially when he tends to freeze and take pictures in the pocket. While in the Philly shell, Boots has occasionally shown to be able to successfully control his opponent's lead hand through using frames. However, he can at times fail to remain consistent and abandon his control, which conversely leaves an opening over the sling for his opponent's overhand or hook from the arm closest to him. While fighting in the 7 positioning, when one fighter is in a Philly shell while being bladed, while the other fighter is in a high guard and squared, the fighter who has the advantage is whoever is controlling the lead hand. To make it worse, Boots can often fail at properly protecting with his rear hand. Combined with his lead hand that he can use to control distance, set traps, and pick apart Vergil's high guard, he could potentially outclass him from mid-range to the outside if he manages to stay off the ropes. However, while Boots has the ability to make it a difficult night for Ortiz, whether he has the boxing IQ to stay consistent is a different story. Outside of the exception of his fight with Stanionis, Boots has struggled to remain disciplined when outboxing his opponent and is obliged fighting in the 50-50 time after time again. There's just not enough evidence to suggest that Boots won't do what he's done for the majority of his career, which has led to him taking more punishment than necessary. The difference is, now he's not facing an opponent he's naturally much bigger than. He's facing someone that roughly matches him in physical size and stature with punching power that could possibly put his lights out if he overstays his visit at mid-range. If he decides to willingly entertain the pocket for too long, Vergil can find great success out-muscling his controls while potentially using angles to attack him from advantageous positioning. In short, if Boots chooses to mostly box, he likely wins. If he chooses to sit there and bang, Vergil likely wins. This has all the makings of a boxing classic that can go to the cards or end in a knockout. I hope this long-awaited matchup actually happens in the near future while they're still at their respective peaks, but only time will tell. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Peace.